I really like this passage because I wrote about how the fact that Mrs. Ramsey starts, or she feels herself. She says that she feels that she's in solitude, that she's separate, but like she's distinct like from both perspective of like being separate from family, but also from being separate from from everything else. So she's a little separate even from sound and the sight. And like we talk about, like she's she's heading over to the sound and the sight, and she's listening, but even so, she isn't really connecting with the sound and the light. And kind of as the passage progresses, she more and more connects with the light. So it's kind of like it slowly takes over, where like you can kind of like if you read it along, like he starts off like it's not like she sees the light again, as if like there's also this change happening. And as like keeps on going, like one's relations change. Her relationship with the light is changing. And she looked at the steady light, which was pitiless or remorseless, which was so much her, yet so little her. And if light was it's getting to the point where the light has some connection to her, but not enough yet. And as the passage progresses, it kind of gets to the point where she gets to the point where like it starts stroking a silver finger, some sealed vessel in her brain, it's really starting to like really connect to her personally, starting to attach to her. And at a certain point, she gets some certain happiness, exquisite happiness. But like it even goes beyond that, where I think the ending is particularly remarkable, where we talk about her happiness and how her ecstasy burst in her eyes, and then the last line I think is brilliant, where she says, "Waves of pure delight raced over the floor of her mind." Where first of all, like that's literally like racing the floor of her mind, but it's going back to a lot of the imagery before it of the floor. We heard mention the floor, like stroking the floor, and there's the waves. And they kind of all interplayed into one, as if like they're all one thing, and she's not really separate from them. And that she's kind of finding her peace, so to speak, through nature, through light and the waves and the sound and the movement and the calming of nature.
Thank you. No, that's really interesting. Sam, you were saying?
Yeah. I think we also have this really nice way in which she is seeing the light and seeing the light illuminate the waves as an object, but also the light is kind of taking control of her. As Jonathan pointed out, we have her looking at the light with an irony in her interrogation, and yet at the same time the light stroking her with its silver fingers, some sealed vessel in her brain. So we have this way, which I think is also reflected in these long S sounds. How at first they kind of represent this really calm, kind of soothing into the waves. And then as the passage progresses and the rhythm builds, the long S sounds kind of wash over her as the waves do the bottom of her mind in this type of ecstasy. And so we have this way in which she is both looking at the light and at the control of the light, and then the way in which the light is, I guess as Jonathan said, changing how she perceives the waves, but then sonically how the long S sounds are at first this calm and then this kind of washing over.
I would like to touch on the fact of, or the notion that she gives voice to the emotions. She describes like her happiness or the delight, the ecstasy as bursting, as like traveling in waves. And I think that by giving it this analogy of like these waves, this like slow and fluid motion, it really like is a part of the work in the whole, because it's just the fluidity, the rapidness of thoughts coursing through a person's mind really brings out the like scene of waves crashing against the shore, joy bursting into one's thoughts and emotions just through rapidity.
Good. Anybody else? Yes, Ray.
Yeah, I'm thinking that this passage, like it used this kind of writing of stream of consciousness, which is like describing quotidian things in very rich thoughts about these things. So essentially in this passage, Mrs. Ramsey is thinking about light and waves, which are very simple, concise things. But then her mind evolves into like this long thought of the evolvement of light, the combination of emotion and what she sees. So I think this kind of relating rich thoughts and emotions to quotidian details is like kind of the part of the style of the whole book.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
I also really like the description of the waves as pure lemon because I think we get, this type of, I don't know, like ecstasy. Wolf brings that up throughout the novel. There, like Johnny said, there are several similar instances to this. But I think the image of lemon gives us kind of a different angle at it because it's not the most like serious or deep description, but at the same time it really nicely captures this feeling of overwhelm. Like when you eat a lemon, it's just sour and overwhelming. So I think that's nice because it gives us kind of a different angle through which to look at this type of ecstasy, which usually carries this like interior ecstasy, which usually carries such a serious tone.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think we also, we get this kind of weird construction where she stopped knitting, she held the long reddish brown stocking dangling in her hands moment. So she's both like the brown stocking, which is obviously a very domestic image, she's both holding it and it's dangling in her hands. It's this kind of weird like double recursive construction. So there's, definitely a way in which the domestic is both within her and she's constructing the domestic in this kind of like parallel or double activity.
Thank you. Yes, Delia and then Jonathan.
I think what Jan said about like how like her mind's like, intertwined with like the structures is very like significant because I think like what I found most interesting about this passage was that the mind was described in like very like familiar ways. So like we have like the lemon, the color, like the taste of it, the flavor. You have the motion of the waves. So it's like the mind kind of takes on like a life of its own. And like it's very interesting that within this like solitude, like in the very beginning, it says that one help oneself out of one's solitude. So she's in solitude at this moment. So in this solitude, you can still have so much motion and emotion like within yourself. So really, like this passage really shows how like the book takes the interior and kind of like draws it out into the exterior through like these very familiar ways.
Yes. Good. Jonathan?
I also partially disagree. I think there is definitely a connection between Mrs. Ramsey and the home, like everybody's kind of pointing out with the floor imagery and the colors. But I also think that Mrs. Ramsey goes way beyond the house. In other words, if you talk about the house, like I think if you contrast, like let's say it's actually the second chapter, the time, as time passes. So there we talk about the house. We talk about the house also as a physical object. So on one hand, like they kind of stopped running the house because Mr. Ramsey passed away. But we also have we have several chapters devoted towards the repair work of the house, which is not Mrs. Ramsey's doing. That's like much more brute force. It's dirty work. It's Mrs. Ramsey is above that. She may be in charge of domestic, but she's not doing cooking. She's not cleaning the house. She's not repairing the house. She's not doing any of that. And more than that, I'd say that Mrs. Ramsey, a lot of the significant scenes, even if they take place in the house, we're never in the house. As readers, when we're reading her mind, she's never in her house. She's looking at the waves. She's looking at the light outside. She's never looking in the house.
Well, I think one of the things that Wolf is doing that's so interesting about how she deals with the domestic is through language. For example, the metaphor of the floor of her mind. I think one of the things is the fact is that the house is a part of her just as much she's as physically inhabiting the house. And also, I'm not talking about the large scheme of the novel. In this passage, I think the two are intertwined entirely. What happens in chapter 2 would not necessarily divorce Mrs. Ramsey physically from the house in this passage, or at least even through the hole of the window. And if anything, actually, the fact that the house undergoes the physical reconstruction also is treating the house as being at least more than an object in the stationary sense, but an object which in a book has the capabilities of being symbolic and even going through character development in a similar way that Mrs. Ramsey never really gets the chance to because she passes away before the house is actually put under construction.
No, I admit that in other words, that there is a lot of tension between Mrs. Ramsey and the house. I just think that there's important to differentiate between the house as a reference to the domestic life and the house as a reference to like the roof on top of your head and the food you eat, which in like the literal sense, not as in like not takes care of it in like the who sponsors and provides you with food, but who's in charge of like making the food, who's in charge of cutting up the firewood or cutting the potatoes or whatever it is. Like, she's not in charge of that, and she goes beyond that. Or she sees domestic life as something which goes beyond the physical confines of the house.
But I think it's being a woman and a woman of the early 20th century, the domestic is her realm.
Yeah, domestic is irrelevant, but the house.
Well, but the house is, I think, throughout a lot of the novels set up as emblematic of the domestic. I mean, it is literally the space that encompasses the domestic.
Yeah, I'm just differentiating between the house as a physical space versus the house as its representation of the domestic.
I guess so.